This is the Entrepreneur Unleashed Show, episode 19 with Nic Lucas.
The Entrepreneur Unleashed. The Entrepreneur Unleashed. The Entrepreneurs Unleashed. The podcast where purpose and passion become revenue streams. Be real. Take a stand. Change lives. Here's your host, Patty Keating.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Unleashed Show. I'm your host, Patty Keating. Entrepreneurs everywhere are creating a new breed of business success. They're making their own rules, taking a stand for their purpose, leading through integrity, and making money by changing lives. Join me each week for compelling messages that will inspire and empower you to unleash your true purpose. Would you like to turn your message into a signature system and monetize it with a program or product online? Join me for the Online Biz webinar, where we'll take you through the steps required to monetize your message. Head on over to theonlinebizwebinar.com and reserve your spot today. I am so happy to introduce you today to Dr. Nic Lucas. He is a friend that I met in a group that we're both a part of, and he is up to some really amazing things across the pond. And so welcome, Nic.
Good morning or afternoon or evening, wherever it is that you are.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
I appreciate it. So tell us a little bit about what you're up to right now.
Look, I've got quite a varied past and have my hands in quite a few different businesses, but the main thing I'm doing is working with people, mostly in health and wellness and coaching areas, just to really help them shift to a more evolved place and to have an incredible business. I've been through the journey myself, and it's such a wonderful life, this life that we lead as coaches and consultants, that you just can't help but want to help other people who are on that path and that journey. And I know that's exactly what you do as well, Patty, and it's just so much fun, isn't it?
It's a blast. It's my favorite thing to see people grow and transform. Absolutely. So what inspired you in this direction?
Well, I would have to say that I was a high school dropout. I wanted to be a muso, and you don't have to be graduated from high school to be a pop star. And I was a pop star. I need you to know that, Patty.
I'm not surprised at all.
Only about 15 people knew that I was a pop star.
Well, you got 16 now.
Yeah, okay. And when I realized that was a difficult road to travel, going down that music path, I decided to go back to university. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what kind of job to get. And I remember the frustration of being a young man, 19, 20, looking through the jobs available in the newspaper on the weekend, starting at A, and thinking that somehow your life purpose is going to jump out of those ads, jobs for accountants, jobs for auditors, and you'd go through to get to, B, there'd be bookkeepers and butchers, and I just remember being so depressed looking at these advertisements for jobs, hoping that that's where my life purpose would jump out for me. So I found it really challenging to know what to do. And my father gave me some really wise counsel at the time. And he just said, Nic, you have to make a choice to do something, but whatever you do, make sure that it is involved in helping people. As long as what you're doing is directly involved in helping other people, you'll find fulfillment in life. And so really I have to attribute the choices I made right back at that early age to my dad, because it was just such great advice. To cut a long story short, it led me to university. I studied science. I became an osteopath. I then did a whole lot of study in pain medicine and became a researcher. And all of that work was, as you can see, directly involved with helping people. But as you and I both know, there's just such incredible freedom and autonomy when you have your own business. And that's why I had to use all those skills and develop my own business to have the kind of autonomy that allows you the lifestyle you want and allows you to actually help more people. Because so often at least the jobs I was in, I was helping people, but I knew that there was so much more I could do if I learnt how to leverage myself And I think that's the key thing, isn't it, that you and I both have spoken a bit about, is how to just leverage what you're doing and reach and touch so many more people.
And is that what you would say was the inspiration for you? Because it sounds like you had a successful career, but maybe there was a longing or a desire to do more.
Absolutely. I was working primarily as an osteopath. Now, in Australia, that means that we specialize in musculoskeletal problems. So the majority of people I was seeing had pain. They had pain in their neck or their arms or their backs or whatever it was, and I was involved in helping them rehab and all that sort of thing. But it was one-on-one in a room, and as much as I had a lot of fulfillment with that, over time, I began to realize two things. One, these people were in pain, and while I could help them get back into their life, they very often were stuck in their life anyway. In fact, part of the reason they were in pain was because they were stuck in their life. They weren't doing what they wanted to do. They were giving in to possessions, to mortgages, to needing two cars instead of one car, and that locked them into these jobs that they didn't like, and they were anxious and depressed. And so it opened up this much bigger world to me of going, you know what, these pain problems people are presenting with are just scratching the surface. There is such a deeper issue going on here because many of us have this profound opportunity to create the life that we would love. And either we're not aware of it, and so therefore we don't learn how to do it, or we know that it's possible, but we don't have the courage to do it and we get stuck. And that's where I saw the opportunity to use the internet to expand my reach beyond my four walls. Which is, I wrote a book back in 2009 to help people who have anxiety and panic attacks. And the key reason for writing that book was, I'm consulting people one-on-one, but if I put the information I have into a book and I distribute it over the internet, I can reach people, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world. And so that was really what kind of motivated me at that point to shift.
What major obstacles showed up on your path once you did that?
The obstacles, I would say, what are going to be common to everyone is that fear of failure. I did have a successful career. I had status in my career. I had assets. I owned a property in our central business district. That there was all these other trappings that were obstacles I had to come over. But all I think that can get summed up is that I was the obstacle. I think we all are. The story we tell ourselves, the reasons we give ourselves for why we're doing what we're doing, our resistance to actually address our fears. They're big obstacles, and then there's lots of other little ones as we go. But I think it's yourself. We've all got to get over ourselves and be extremely honest with ourselves because we are the biggest obstacle.
So how do you find that honesty?
Well, that's a really good question. I think that people often do know the answer to a lot of things. And if they were to take the time to sit down and go, look, why, let's just say, for instance, someone was sitting there and they had a small business on the side that they would love to make their major business, and 2 years has gone by and it's still just trickling along. If they were to take a day off, just one day, and you look at the difference between 1 day and 2 years, it's only 1 day, and literally sit down and think about why it hasn't changed and give themselves the time, then often they'd know the answer. I think there's that aspect to it. The other aspect to it for me that I've also experienced in a very deep way is getting coaching and consulting with somebody else, because very often you can't see your own perspective. You need a different perspective. You need to escape your current perspective to move to a new one. And very often that's the value that a coach or a consultant or even just a trusted advisor can bring you, because they can ask you questions that you haven't asked yourself, and you can be stunned by the answers that you give.
That is so true. And that brings out that honest look at what's really going on.
Because it's very hard to catch your own tail,
It is.
Especially if you've got a short one.
So how did you move through the challenges that you encountered?
I began to dislike my life so much, even though there was so many good things about it, but I just began to dislike it. And I think the key thing for me was boredom. I became incredibly bored with the limitations that I had. I became incredibly bored with the negative mindset and limited mindset of the people I was often working with. And so for me, I was compelled, like trying to run away from something as fast as I could. It just got to that boiling point where I went, I've had enough. I have to move on. I have to do something else. And so that was the initial impetus. Impetus was the boredom, I think, for me, the boredom and the frustration of the current version of how life was compared to how I believed it could be. So I think that's for me the main thing. I did have another rather dramatic experience that sticks with me that's slightly different. It was 2006, and we were having our second child, and my mother became unwell and was diagnosed with cancer, and then within 3 months she had passed away. So it's all a big rush of events, and I know that a lot of people listening have experienced that type of thing. And in the lead up to the funeral, I began to notice I had this abdominal pain, but I basically ignored it because I had to help my father organise funeral arrangements. I had to let family friends know what had happened and that type of thing. Anyway, what happened was it turned out that the night before the funeral, I finally figured out that I had appendicitis.
Oh, wow.
And I had to make a choice because, as you know, appendicitis can be life-threatening, especially if it gets advanced. And I had this choice, and I remember lying in my father's house in a room in a single bed by myself with this burning hot pain in my abdomen, thinking to myself, if I go to the hospital now, I'll be admitted and I'll miss out on my mother's funeral. If I stay in this bed, who knows what's going to happen? It's risky. And being in health, of course, I knew the risk. So I decided to take the risk because I wasn't going to miss the funeral, and went to the funeral. And as soon as it was over, a friend of mine drove me to a hospital, and I had emergency surgery. Now, to cut a story short to the actual dramatic part was they had me on a drug called oxycodone, which it suppresses your breathing, basically. And so after the surgery, I stopped breathing. And I went to what many people describe as the most incredible place of peace that you could ever imagine. I mean, you can't imagine it. I even try to imagine it now, and it's like trying to grasp at this experience I had that's hard. And it happened 4 times.
Wow.
And each time I was in this place of peace. The thing that resonates with me most when I think about that is just, one, how peaceful it was, but how I had zero air hunger. I had none. If you try to hold your breath even for 30 seconds, you begin to get that terrible feeling of I need to take a breath. Well, I had none of that at all, and I knew I wasn't breathing. So to breathe was actually required a lot of effort. First of all, it required a decision, and then I had to literally force myself to breathe, and found myself going back into that place 4 times. Now, on the final time, I had to make an extra decision because I knew that if I started breathing again, that I needed to find the buzzer to let the nurse know this was happening. Because I was really, in my mind at the time, I felt like I was playing with death. I wasn't sure if I just let myself go, what was going to happen. So I clicked the buzzer, and they immediately stopped the medication, gave me something else, and of course I'm still here. So the point for that story, and you don't want anyone to have a dramatic story like that, but I'm here for, one, because I chose to be. It feels like that's why I'm here. Okay, that's the meaning I give that moment. And the experience left me thinking, I'm resolute. I'm not going to live a life that isn't the one I want to live. And I don't want to see other people living lives that they don't have to live or don't want to live. Because we are only here for a short period of time. I mean, this gets deep and meaningful, but the practicalities are we're here for a very short period of time, and time goes. And the whole thing about being on the deathbed and having regrets and all that sort of thing, I do not want to be that person, and I don't want other people to have that as well. So that's the other main thing that now really drives me is I draw on that experience back from 2006, and it is still what propels me forward and gives me such determination today.
It taught you a lot,
Mm.
right?
It
I think I would be a completely different person because of the perspective that you now have.
It is. I mean, it's it's only a subtle thing, and it's what I hope to be able to pass on to people without them needing to have that dramatic experience. And that is, you can just say yes to yourself.
Yeah.
You can say yes to yourself. It's okay. Say yes. Move forward with the life that you want. Don't try and live life for somebody else, because when you move into that place of peace, when you move out of where we are now into that other place, none of all those other things that you're worried about now even matter.
Yes.
So you're still there, so you matter.
Yes.
So, just say yes to yourself now. That's the message I'd like to give out.
So, how do you teach people, Nic? Tell us a little bit about what you're up to in your business.
Well, I love the technology of the internet. And so one of the things that also happened when I wrote my book was I had to learn how to market that book. And so I dove very deep into internet marketing, and probably too deep, because I know way too much. I should probably pay other people to do the things I do. But the internet's an incredible tool. And having been through the pain of having to learn the technology and learn the marketing and learn how it all works, that is now one of the key things that I bring people, is that I'm able to help them with that technology, because very often that's the barrier. You and I are sitting on opposite sides of the world, and we've got Skype, but there's other things going on besides Skype. You're having to record this, and after you've recorded it, you're going to have to edit it, which means you need some software, and then you need to know how to get it uploaded to a website, and then there's iTunes and Stitcher and all these other things that can be an overwhelm for people. And so, because I've got all those skills and that expertise, that's one of the key things I provide the clients I've got, is that I help them navigate all that, because I know how to do it, and I've got a team of people who can do it. But just knowing how to do the technology isn't enough. And so that's why I work with my clients and other business owners to help them get that mindset as well, to help them believe in themselves, to help them have more sense around the products they have, to help them understand that they too need to inspire their clients and literally be the best person they can be for their clients. It's not about money grabbing. We don't set up businesses to make money. We set up businesses to help people. And by helping people, we make money. And that's the little mind shift that I help people go through as well. But when I say little, you and I both know that it's not so little. that the issues people have around money, and the issues they have around themselves and their ability and their value, are they worthwhile? All of those things are the issues that I deal with. So it's a combination of those two things, that real technical side to help people overcome that, and then I help them overcome themselves.
That's awesome. What are you passionate about right now? What's coming up in your business that inspires you?
Well, it's the same thing I think that's inspired me since I was little, and it's the brain. And when I was working in pain research, I was in what was formerly known as the decade of the brain. It was 1999 to 2000, and there was this worldwide collective of a collection of researchers who banded together to seriously develop what we know about the brain in terms of research. And we're now in another brain initiative. Obama has just put, I think if my numbers are right, another $200 million into mapping the human brain over the next 2 years. And so what I'm beginning to see come out in the research, which I still dabble in, is these incredible insights we have about the brain now that help us understand how to be better people. Just for example, lots of people have been meditating for a long time, and people who love meditation don't need any proof that it works, because they're experiencing it. But there's a lot of people who don't meditate, or people who've tried it and haven't stuck with it. Yet the brain research is so compelling that even within 3 to 8 weeks of doing mindfulness meditation, for example, you increase the grey matter density of your brain in all the key regions that would help you run a business. So just the same way, if you go and pump iron, you get bigger biceps. If you do mindfulness meditation, all the key parts of your brain that are creative, that help you deal with pain, that help you have perspective, that help you have empathy, that help you read other people, all of those areas of your brain literally get more dense with the thinking, processing part of it. And given that we know this from a scientific point of view, I'm even more passionate and can then really help other people begin to meditate because I can provide them with such solid evidence that it's good for them and it will help them in their business. So, anything to do with the brain and behavior and how we can be successful and how we can help other people is what I'm passionate about. And I can't at the moment see me losing that passion for a long time.
Sounds like it's been with you for a long time.
Oh, it has been. I mean, and that's why it's this era in particular is so exciting for me because I get to still have this passion, but then there's all this new work coming out about it and all these new discoveries. And then what that does, it helps me not get bored. And that goes back to what I said before. The boredom thing for me is an issue. And right now I'm not bored at all. I mean, I'm bouncing off the walls with everything and it's so exciting.
I can tell by your energy. So what's your vision for your business for, the next 3 to 5 years?
Look, I want to use all that I'm learning about the brain to become the best person that I can become. And having been in business, especially the type of business I'm in, you can't be good at what you and I do, Patty, unless we become the best people we can become. And the better we become, the better you and I become, the better we serve our clients, the better they become, the better outcomes they have.
Yeah.
So, I'm like a kid in a candy store. I get to access all this kind of experience and knowledge and wisdom I've gained over the years. I get to combine that with all the brand new brain research coming out that helps us give a better context to what it is that we do and apply it to myself to help myself be a better person. And the best way I get to be a better person is by being better in business. Because there's nothing like having to be in your own business and to push that. There's nothing like that for personal development that I've come across because being in your own business just challenges you on so many levels.
Yes, I want to talk about that personal growth. But first, I want you to tell us what's the very best advice you've ever received?
Well, I have been the fortunate recipient of lots of good advice. And the best advice that I've received would have to be to not be judgmental. Now, I've received that advice multiple times throughout my life, but I didn't really get it until actually earlier this year when I was doing a bit of personal development work. It was a complete surprise that it happened, but for the first time, I actually understood on a deep emotional level what it meant to be judgmental and how being judgmental severely limits your ability to be creative and to be the best person you can be. And so now what happens is, it's like judgment for me is, and when I mean judgment, let's give it practical things. Someone sends you an email and you don't like it, and so you react, and you're immediately typing an email back to them that's defending yourself. You're in judgment because you're judging that they're wrong and you're right, and you need to defend yourself, and there's this right-wrong thing going on. Or someone says something and you don't agree with something that they've said, and all of a sudden you stop listening to anything else they've said because of the one thing that you happen to know is factually incorrect or that you don't agree with. If you find yourself doing that, you're in judgment. If you see your child reacting in a way that you don't think is the best thing to do and you find yourself lecturing them, very often you're in judgment. And what I've found for me is that this judgment impacts every single aspect of my life. It impacts the way that I was relating to people. And by being able to sit back and it's not that I'm not judgmental anymore. We all are. It all comes up for us. It's about whether we buy into that judgment or whether we look at the judgment that we're seeing and go, there's that judgment thing come up again. Am I going to buy into this right now, or am I going to step back and just let it slide along and just not react out of judgment? So I would say that of all the things, and I've studied with incredible people, leaders in the field of all different areas of healthcare and psychology and research and business, and that one key thing I would say can be the most transformative is the word I was looking for, thing is to be able to move out of judgment. It elevates your ability to communicate effectively beyond anything else I've come across.
That's some good advice. I had a mentor who once said, many times said, all judgment is self-judgment. And anything that you're judging is a reflection of your own internal issues that you have not faced. So if you could take the time to look at the judgment you're having on the other person and ask what that means about you, you might learn something that you may otherwise not have seen. So
That is 100% what I was talking about. I mean, I know that exactly what you're talking about.
and I've learned so much that I would absolutely not have seen had I not asked those questions.
Well, your brain can only focus on one thing at a time, consciously at least. And if all you're focused on is what's wrong out there, then you lose any ability to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't learn if you're actively judging somebody, you can't learn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key thing, is that when judgment comes up, I mean, for me, it's now a visual thing in my mind's eye. When judgment comes along like a red overlay of the situation, that's almost like it's like a mist of red floats in my mind's eye, and it's my cue that, hey, Nick, there's judgment. And just like you've just said, then use it as a cue to question yourself. Why do you feel the need to be judgmental here?
Yeah.
And what is the lesson for you? And then you spend the whole day learning things about yourself
Exactly.
instead of giving people a piece of your mind. I mean, that's the issue, isn't it?
Oh, that's great. It's so true. Like, it takes you down on a journey you never would have
Hmm.
been able to discover otherwise. I have been there many times. Okay, so it sounds like we've touched on this, but what personal growth have you experienced as a result of all of this?
Yeah, I actually do think that it can all be summed up in that. I mean, the reason I am feeling the judgment thing at the moment is that I did go and consult with an Osho practitioner, and we just sat and we talked about things, and this is what came up. And when I look back through my various businesses, they were successful, but I can see, looking back, the things that were limiting me back then. It's all to do with that self-belief and self-worth, which really is judgment,
Mm-hmm.
because you're judging yourself
Mm-hmm.
negatively.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon, like, in all honesty, there's been times when I've looked at myself in the mirror and cursed myself with the foulest words you can think of. And when you look at yourself and you have that opinion of yourself, it's a sign that things aren't right.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you want to create beauty in the world when you're full of that darkness and you think those things about yourself? It's incongruent. And, so I would say that, there's been all sorts of personal growth. You had to come over fear of this, and you have to get over the skill of that, and you have to learn to be motivated here, and you have to be persistent here, and you have to learn to get over being shy, and you have to, there's all those things that crop up, but none of them, I think, are as deep as this loving yourself and letting that judgment of yourself go.
Mm, that's good. Makes the journey worthwhile, all the growth and realizations and expansion that we create in our lives.
Oh, and when you see your clients go through things as well,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're the coach and the consultant, but you're also the student. And the
Absolutely.
you can if you're aware, then the things and the lessons you can learn from your students is quite incredible as well.
Yes. So let's talk about tools and resources. What gadgets or tools do you use to make your life easier?
Well, I'm a complete Mac addict, and that's mostly because they've got such an incredible brand, and I'm in love with the brand, but I love how it all works together. But there's a little app that most people would have it. If they don't have it yet, they might think about it. It's called One Password. Now, this is a very, very practical tip here, nothing to do with judgment. Um, but the number of people I come across who still do not have a password management system, so they're either using one single password for all of their logins, or they sit there when I might meet with someone and we need to fix up something on their website or their domain name, or they have to log into iTunes, for example, or whatever, and they sit there scratching their heads, trying to go back through emails, trying to search to find this elusive password that they need to log in. I can't tell you how much time is wasted with people missing passwords, forgetting passwords, not knowing the passwords, resetting their passwords. So 1Password is an app you can get in the App Store. It's literally the numeral 1 with the word password, and it just sits in all your browsers. You only need 1Password, like one master password that you remember, and then that little bit of software takes care of everything else. It auto-fills all the forms. It logs you into every website. It's incredibly secure. And so I would say such a little tiny thing, but that I use that little app every single day, probably hundreds of times. So that is a tip. If you don't have password management, and it doesn't have to be the 1Password app, any one, password management system, please get one. It will save you lots of time.
We'll put a link in the show notes, and just a heads up, the page will be pattykeating.com, Nic Lucas, NIC Lucas. You can also search for the word Nic in the search bar, and that'll pull up his page as well. And you can head over and get 1Password and find some of the links to his amazing work that you could look at as well. I have a confession, Nic.
What is it? What's the confession?
I only 2 weeks ago got 1Password.
Well, I'm glad that my tip isn't outdated, that it's still relevant. That's good.
No, it's amazing. I'm in awe of it. It even presses submit and logs me in. It's like, are you kidding me? Because I was scrambling and resetting passwords and trying to go into my preferences to find out what the password was. So I have a big smile.
That's so funny. That is so funny.
Okay, what about books, podcasts, or blogs? What do you recommend?
As much as I'm on the internet, I tend to just love books, so I still buy them. I do get them on the Kindle, and I do get hard copies. I kind of save them up on Amazon, and then we'll get 10 or 15 in a row. Books. I mean, I've got so many books that I could recommend. Do you have any particular topic that you think would be of most interest to people listening?
I think maybe how to overcome judgment.
Wouldn't that be good if there was a book on that?
Maybe
there's a tip. I should write it. Yeah. Well, in fact, I am writing a second book, and there's a chapter on all that because it's part of the story.
Awesome.
So I would have to do that. Look, this will sound, almost quaint, but one of the most profound books that I've read is the book by Professor Robert Cialdini called Influence. Mm-hmm. And as much as it's been around for a long time, it's been updated, and a lot of people know about that book, but they haven't read it, or maybe they read it 10 years ago and they've forgotten it. And even though people think they know about influence, having been studying it in great detail for about the last 5 years, it's still so worthwhile learning how to be more influential instead of just winging it. Mm-hmm. I can't emphasize enough that there are simple things you can learn that will slightly change the way you communicate, that will have a profound impact on your success. And that's the power of influence. And it's not someone's idea they made up. This is 30 years of social science research that lends, it's not just an idea. You know that if you implement these things, they are very likely to work. And so if you haven't had a flick through that book ever before, or maybe you haven't picked it up for the last 5 years or so, go and pick up Influence and read through and remind yourself, because it is straightforward, and people who aren't influential can become far more influential, and even those who are already very influential can still maximize their influence by reading a book like that. So I would say that goes down as one of my all-time favorites.
Yes, I agree. Okay, looking back, if you were to do it all over, what would you tell your younger self?
Well, yeah, I think you can guess. I would tell my younger self the insight about judgment. And I think I'd have to hang around my younger self quite a bit, though, to keep reminding that younger self. But if that was a lesson I'd learnt a long time ago, I think that, I just would have been so much more effective. My impact on the world would have been so much greater by now if I'd had that one thing. And the other thing that I would tell myself is do whatever you can to meet people outside of your normal world, especially in the world that you look at and wish you were a part of or wanted to be a part of. The longer you stay around, and like as much as all the people around you are fantastic and you might love them and they might support you, they can't help you shift out of where you are if they haven't shifted out of there either. They can only support you in that shift. So, go and have the courage to move out of your comfort zone and go and speak with people. The thing that astounds me really, I look back, is how many times I had the courage to reach up out of my existing world to somebody who I was intimidated by, who I thought wouldn't want to speak to me, who I thought wouldn't have the time of day for me. And you speak to these people, and guess what? Most of the time, they're incredibly helpful and they want to help you up.
Yes.
So I would say they're the two things, the judgment and being prepared to move out of your current frame of reference, get a different perspective, and reach out to people who are there because, you'll find a helping hand almost all the time.
That's a beautiful thing. Thank you so much, Nic, for joining us. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's a great reason to catch up.
Yes. Would you like to turn your message into a signature system and monetize it with a program or product online? Join me for the Online Biz webinar, where we'll take you through the steps required to monetize your message. Head on over to theonlinebizwebinar.com and reserve your spot today. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Entrepreneur Unleashed Show. If you did, please go to pattykeating.com and let me know what you're up to this year in your business. While you're there, be sure to grab your copy of 5 Quick Ways to Share Your Expertise.